I'm sitting outside, hence all the noise, all the birds. Okay, please excuse it. It's nice to hear that anyway. I was thinking the other day about responsibility and responsibility rather than an individual point of view, from a societal point of view, or rather over society or culture or something like that. So I thought I'd look up what the definition of, and this is from Wikipedia, not Wikipedia, from Google. It says responsibility, the state or fact of having a duty to deal with something or having control over someone. A true leader takes responsibility for their team and helps them achieve goals. Well, I thought about this in relation to our political system. In our political system, by law, apparently, well, I would think by law that you have to relinquish our responsibility for making decisions to politicians. So that's what's called representative democracy. Another way you could call it is responsibility democracy. In other words, responsibility is handed from one person onto others, a small group of people. However, it seems that politicians don't actually use that same sort of technique to relinquish their responsibility. For example, in government, they'll form a corporatised entity. For example, in Australia, Australia Post, right? Australia Post is a corporate entity, therefore it's run by a board of directors, and therefore the government's not responsible for everything that they do. Perhaps they could argue they fully own it, so they can do. They're responsible. But let's take another situation. For example, interest rates. Interest rates. The Australian government doesn't control interest rates. That's controlled by the Reserve Bank. They created this other institution, which is not a corporate thing, and they say they can't control that. Therefore, they relinquish their responsibility. The other thing is anything to do with corporatisation. For example, prices of fuel and petrol. Right, that's all done by private enterprise. Government has nothing to do with it. Therefore, they relinquish the responsibility for doing that, even though sometimes they step in. For example, the price of electricity is too high, they actually subsidise electricity. Interesting. So how does this responsibility thing work? So what I did is I went on to Google's AI, which is Google Gemini, and asked it the question. In fact, I initially went on to a Google search and it didn't give me sort of the answers I wanted. So I got the Google AI to do it for me. So I actually put it in Google AI and wanted it to read it out to me, but then it stops my microphone from working on this on my phone, so I couldn't do that. So what I did is ask the question. I'd like to know how individuals' responsibility is given to politicians in the Australian Constitution, and it gave me this answer. So rather than me reading it, which I'm a horrible reader, I'll get it to someone else to read it for me. Okay, read aloud.
Individual responsibility to politicians in Australian Constitution. The short answer is, it isn't explicitly outlined in the Australian Constitution. While the Constitution establishes the framework for government in Australia, it doesn't directly address how individual responsibility is delegated to politicians. This concept primarily stems from a system known as responsible government, which is a convention rather than a constitutional provision.
So that's it. It's a convention, which means conventions, I get the impression, are not written in law. It's just what everybody does. For example, a convention is, in English spelling, is you spell words as per the dictionaries, but it's not a law. It's not a rule. There's no authority in it involved. So that's what a convention is. So there's only a convention that our responsibility is taken away from us. However, there are probably also laws that say if we do something against a law, therefore we're responsible. But if a politician does it, they're possibly not. Okay. Anyway, that was just an idea. Oh, one other little thing. Okay. I also had a look at what this is all called, which is called, where am I going to find her? I'll move over here. Uh, where is it? Passing the buck. I wanted to find it. Okay. Yeah, it's on the screen. And from that screen, I go to Buck passing. All right. This is a thing called passing the buck, which is on Wikipedia. Buck passing, or passing the buck, or sometimes playing the blame game, is an act of attributing to another person or group one's own responsibility. It is often used to refer to a strategy in power politics, whereby a state tries to get another state to deter or fight an aggressive state while remaining on the sidelines. But going a little bit further, it talks about the buck pass, the buck stops here, which is something that Truman had. So let's read what that. The buck stops here is a phrase that was popularized by US President Harry S. Truman, who kept a sign with the phrase on his desk in the Oval Office. The phrase refers to the notion that the president has to make the decisions and accept the ultimate responsibility for those decisions. Truman received the sign as a gift from someone. I won't read that. Okay. Another interesting thing about that has to do with Donald Trump. Okay. On January the 10th, 2019, 19 days into a federal government shutdown because of something to do with funding, a reporter asked President Donald Trump if the buck stops with you over the shutdown. Trump reported that the buck stops with everyone, which means everybody's responsible, therefore not him. I suppose he's one of everybody, but not wholly responsible. Anyway, interesting the way politicians do it all. All right. Any comments? Email me. Bye.